Because we need like a moment of, time. My name is Erie. I'm one of the founders of the Olympia Lamplighters, which is where you are now. We are a creative workspace, so essentially a community space for artists, entrepreneurs, people who just need to get out of the house for 5 minutes because, well, my cat's a little animal, so I need to get out of the house sometimes. But we work with artists, musicians. We have a recording studio. We have space for artists to have their own desks and their own kind of little studio space. And we're trying really hard to bring new classes into the area. Once COVID eases up, hopefully we can have our dances again. We usually have a monthly queer dance as well as a blues and swing dance monthly. So keep an eye on our calendar. Our website is olylamplighters.com, and you can find all of the things that we do there. And I'm available for questions after all of this is over. So, but yeah, thanks. I did not know.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second live event since COVID started, which is super fun. We have Louise Busby here with her book, Unfollow Me, Essays on Complicity. And I'm about to read a giant block of text, so get ready. Louise Busby spent years in the nonprofit sector specializing in diversity and inclusion. She spoke at academic institutions, businesses, and detention centers on the topics of race, power, and privilege, and delivered over 200 workshops to nonprofit organizations all over the California Bay Area. In 2016, fed up with what passed as progressive in the Pacific Northwest, Busby uploaded a 1-minute video about race, white institutions, and faux liberalism to Instagram. The video received millions of views across social platforms. As her pithy persona, Jill's Black, became a fit voice weighing in on all things race-based, Jill began to notice parallels between the performance of diversity in the white corporate world and of wokeness for her online following. Though, she realized, restricted. Unfollow Me is about tokenism, microfame, and inhabiting spaces, real and virtual, Black and white. So complicity is the price of entry. Busby's social commentary manages to be both private, funny, and equally open-hearted as she recounts her shape-shifting moves among the subtle hierarchies of progressive communities. Unfollow Me is a sharply personal and self-questioning critique of white fragility, and other words for racism, respectability politics, and other words for shame, and all the places where fear masquerades as praise. And with that, Jill, I give the floor to you.
It doesn't seem like I'll be funny, but I will be. I will. It's fine. So for this part, while I'm sitting alone, 60 people, and
You're good.
Hi, this is my face. And this is also. Turn this a little bit. That's cool. Okay. First of all, I just want to thank everybody for coming out. We're so used to being at home, and I know that this is a gigantic endeavor. At least for me. This is usually my third nap time. And so it's so nice to spend it with you instantly. I'm going to read from an essay called Unfollow. And it feels like it will be relevant to the audience, so this feels like the right one. I always fix glasses I'm no longer wearing. I just started wearing contacts. I'm sorry. All right. The 2020 election is a few weeks away, and my family and I have moved to Olympia for the second time. This time to the heavily forested outskirts of a capital city that hasn't changed nearly as quickly as we have since we left it 4 years ago to head back to a deep south that's still just a little too deep for me. After so many moves in the last few years, I've grown increasingly more uncomfortable with naming anything outside of myself as a home, worried that it will always feel like a trap or a setup, an identity too susceptible to circumstance to be an identity that I desire. Not all trees are deeply rooted by nature. Some grow their roots close to the surface. If they're buried too far down, the dirt growth stops, and the stress eventually kills them. And yet, I am also happy to return to Olympia and to remember the right streets to turn left on, and the person who still works in the alcohol and spirits department at grocery outlet. I see her every Monday when I drive the 24 minutes there from our house to buy heavily discounted quick sale organic kale and red wine blends straight from the southern region of Central California. I like that I recognize her even with her mask on. The new place with the yard that's just big enough not to intimidate, and the quiet that makes me use my inside voice even when I'm standing outside. The quiet that's interrupted only by the random vocalizations of stellar shades and northern flickers, that free-roaming long-haired cats that torment the eager short-haired dogs in fenced yards, the footsteps of the deer as they nibble their way down the fence of scalar junipers that separate us from our new neighbor on one side, the one who waves when we see him, feels more like home than anywhere I've ever lived. I've panicked. Anxious for the distraction of a calamity or a big sudden decision that isn't about the end of my marriage, or a big sudden fight that isn't with my stepfather, or a big sudden forward motion that isn't yet another quick move back. I'm anxious for the chaos that doesn't surprise, the consistent one. Luckily, I have a smartphone. It allows me to access my chaos from an outside source, fast and cheap. And by the second week, I've managed to convince myself that the other next door neighbor, the one who has never spoken, is in some kind of angry white pride militia. He has emphasized this level of cultural commitment by having a shaved head and several tattoos on his arms that don't seem whimsical or ironic. He also wears a concerning number of black t-shirts, the graphics made indistinguishable by the distance between us. When he fills his hummingbird feeders with fresh nectar and doesn't make eye contact with me, I can just tell that he's the enemy. When he loads his young kids into the backseat of the family C-Glass Pearl Prius, and it's absent of the important telltale Prius bumper stickers that I rely on to know how accepted my identities are wherever I am, it's obvious that he's plotting against us. When he mows his grass and does it in large headphones, blasting music only he can hear, I can just tell that he's not trustworthy. And he does it all as if he doesn't want to be bothered. But what's he bothered by exactly? The threat of small talk or the threat of blackness that I can't really know until I know makes me nervous. So I have to try to know as much as I can. And I have to seek out the information that confirms what I suspect. Homie is a proud boy. Luckily, every 3 seconds, there are new articles published about the pandemic and the election and the worst year that only a few people saw coming. And after reading the headlines and last paragraphs of a few of those articles, I'm feeling pretty fucking confident that the neighbor is a proud boy, and on election night, he will emerge from his house to defend his promised land against social distancing, socialized diversity, and whatever else threatens his grip on the biggest piece of the pie in the sky. But even if he isn't, can any of us really be too careful? What would be enough to validate my fear? Isn't all the fear valid when everything feels like a threat? If everything I hold on to might be mistaken for a weapon? If the stakes are so high that if I'm right, I just might die? And I'm always trying to decide which one I'd rather do more, wrong or alive. But I'm not wrong, right? Because militias are happening, and I'm not wrong, right? Because every time my brother goes for a run, I have to pretend that I'm not hyper aware of every long minute until he returns. And I'm not wrong, right? Because we live in a big, scary world where we control nothing and no one, unless, well, you can't really trust anybody, honestly. Unless they agree with you. Not only about everyone else and who they really are, but about who you really are too. Social media is suggesting that if I have a remote job, I should escape the United States and move somewhere safe that has really good internet connection. This way I can keep my American job and live very well in a country that has a lower cost of living. Plus, I don't even have to miss out on entertaining myself with the bad news from back home. It will follow me on my smartphone and make me feel included. Something to seriously consider. I read an article at 2 a.m. that screams its headline from the belly of my popular searches and mine data. Black man set on fire by white neighbor in rural America. And even though the article eventually reveals itself to be about a lover's quarrel over an alleged infidelity and stolen drugs, the truth of it doesn't solve my problem. It's not about what it is, it's about what it could have been, but happened not to be. What it could always be until it is. In the mostly white neighborhood of diverse incomes where I now live, there's a quiet war being waged. On front lawns and in the windows of houses, there are mostly small Biden-Harris, anti-Trump and trust science signs, and a few large Keep America Great ones too. There are Bernie bumper stickers and faded Vic Carson ones too. There are Tibetan prayer flags hanging from the turquoise trims of tiny houses, and there are in this house we pray flags in front of the slightly bigger houses too. There are also badge-shaped security company signs highly visible in almost everyone's front yards, in case any version of God ever requires a helping hand or a little bit of backup. I make an appointment to have a security system installed. If they all have them, then we definitely need one. And every morning and every night I check the news on my phone so that I can be reminded why I should always be scared or mad, how it's my civic duty, a way to participate. Even though assumptions save some people's lives and end others, I figure they're my right at this point, and it's a privilege to get to check the news instead of being the news. Remember that. Perhaps the neighbor is a proud boy, so I must decide what I want to do about him. But first, I must finish the essay that is meant to be the last essay of this book, about Jill is Black and me these days, and how we get along.
We're going to join. Thank you so much for coming for writing. Yeah. Oh my gosh, yes. He's came for you.
It's very romantic.
So there are posts on your Instagram, interspersed with the essays and Unfollow Me. When you were writing, when did you know that you wanted your online experience to frame or inform your collection of essays?
It was kind of a last minute decision. And I'd written a lot of the essays, but it felt like I couldn't do enough to make people understand what I had who Jill Black was. So without some history there, if you didn't follow me, I'm like, do you know what I'm talking about? Like, what's it like to root for a person online who's doing some sort of like, I'm mad about this thing, and then you get into them, and then we worship them into career opportunities. So if you don't know that, then, you know, maybe you're missing something. So they got added at the end, and I think it really makes it come together. Now, my mother told me to do it the whole time, but I did not listen to her. And so I'm still living that down. So it should have always been there, we get it. But it was there at the last minute as the rest of my life.
Did you have to comb through Jill's Black Instagram account?
I did, and it was terrible. I had to relive everything. I was like, why did you say that? But I did it. I did it for the sake of the book. But I did, and it's good to spend a lot of time living in that moment up until the present. So it was a good experience.
Did it have like a relationship to like you vision when you're writing and putting your essay, improvising and reading it? Did it like participate in that type of writing, or is social media writing very different than?
Social media writing, it wasn't that different for me. I'd gotten so used to speaking all of these scripts that I've written for myself on these videos that I just started writing like that. And so it really changed my writing style a lot. And I think it really helps with the flow of this book because you can almost hear it in my voice, but it changed my, sorry about this, but it changed my writing a lot. And so I think it informed, I wanted the reader to really hear, like be inside of my head and hear it as me, even if they've never heard me. And so I think hopefully we get there. Okay, great.
There's a piece in your collection about a residency that you attended, and it kind of permeates the sense of performance or needing to perform while you're there with the other artists. Was that piece written during your residency, and can you go more into the process of writing with like while you were convinced about residency?
Yeah, so I started an essay at that residency, but I did not write very much there. Mostly I took long walks and stared out at the water, pretending that I was thinking things to write about. I ate a lot of food there. I wasted a lot of time. I talked on the phone a lot. The pressure of we will write now was maybe not for me. But I think what I did get from it was the feeling that I was getting closer to wanting to write. the book. And then, of course, being there ends up in, this book. And so it inspired me, but not necessarily in the right way, because being in this world where, you are sort of there as the diversity, right? So you're there to be the Black person who has the opportunity, and it is your job to be grateful for the opportunity, even though being there means that you are just trickle down representation for your identity group, and then you drink their wine and you take the money and you whatever, and but it's hard in the back of your head to think, what is this for? How does this really help anybody? I feel great about it, and I get to do that as a Black queer woman and all the things that I am, but I don't really know what I'm doing. Just one second. I'm gonna get 6 feet away from you. Okay. So I didn't really know what I was doing on behalf of intersections. I don't know what you can do on behalf of intersections just by receiving indulgent things. So it was the first time when I realized I wanted to be talking about what it's like to be in these rooms as a person who had been chosen by a small demographic of people, what was offered there, and how no one really had any intention of that being spread around to anybody else who wasn't chosen to be there. And then why was I there? Right, because I'm still there. And since this is Essays on Complicity, everything is, about my decision to be there. It's not just about everybody else. It's like, hey, I'm talking about you, but also I'm one of you. So, trying to walk that line between being the person who's there and what I'm willing to admit to in this book.
And you said that that experience was moving you towards representing the question of unfollowing.
Yes, but I think more in theme than in actual writing.
Makes sense. Aside from the posts of social media and the last essay in particular, which I have questions about, your essays tend to be in second person. What kind of drew you to that decision?
Yeah, so the whole book is kind of like breaking up with my online persona. So it made sense to sometimes talk to myself in a persona, sometimes talk to an audience, sometimes talk to me as me. But it was kind of an artistic decision to never know who I was talking with or as. And in the end, it culminates into this, final confrontation between myself and my online persona. And again, it's not just online because everybody has some kind of persona. If you work a job, you have a persona. If you don't have one in a romantic relationship. Sorry, that's why we have divorce. But I think it says a lot now. But okay, hold on. Lessons. And so I think we all have personas, so I wanted to be relatable, and whoever you are that is scripted, that is not really you, that you would come up with out of a need for safety or acceptance or to be politically aligned, think you are politically aligned, whatever it is, this is the confrontation between those parts of yourself, the reaction to the society and then who you wish you could be in the society. And so that is what happened.
Yeah, thanks. Can you go a little more into the reaction of the society with this you are in the society?
Sure. I mean, I think in these days with social media, we have an expectation, and that's what the last essay which I just read is really about, or read from, that it's just the extremes. And if you're not extreme enough and you're not angry enough, you're not really doing your part. If you're not behaving the same way that other people are, and get really upset, you have to change everything. You wake up in the morning, there are about 700 new problems a second, they're all yours to solve. I hope you know that. And that's the point of life, so because that's doable. And so you should do that. You should update yourself on all the problems. You and your friends should like each other's personal things, but also your political. And so we're getting into all of this sort of social pressure to say what you should do, what you should say, how you should feel about the person who disagrees with you. And I don't know, I guess I just wanted to confront that at the end, and I know when I'm being dishonest, right? We know what it looks like to be our honest self. And I even had a question last night about, performative allyship, whatever that means. And then how do you not get tired of people who are being performative allies? But you're being a performative educator. I'm not saying everything that I could really say. I would have to say that as myself and not as my identities. And my identities have a script, and we have to agree on that. A script to say, no, this is what we all think now. And so, it becomes a sort of monolith, even when you're not trying. Even the group itself represents difference, it can become a monolith. And so I think I'm just trying to talk my way out of a monolith, but not out of my identities.
Thank you. Also, audience, I want you guys to start articulating your own questions, because I will try to do eventually. These are the portion that you read to us a few moments ago, specifically the portion about trees and like last we have this very intimate relationship with trees, and you wrote that trees roots spread out and they don't spread down, so they spread too far down and stressed. And I'm wondering if there was metaphor in that about what happens when you deeply influence yourself and beginning to reach out and connect to other people as opposed to.
That is so beautiful. No, I don't mean that. I wish that was that. No, I just meant that I like to move. And then we were in the Pacific Northwest, so I was like, oh, trees. But no, I'm gonna start saying, what's that? So if you can just write it down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Branding our identity and identity that we have at birth, and also identity that we create, specifically online, is just stressed. And I was hoping you could talk a little bit about the conversation that you do have with your and what the process was like writing. Like, did it feel like three versions of you? Did it feel like one concrete internet version of you and then thinking you? What was unpacking that like for you?
I mean, anything we come up with is us, I guess, even if it's strictly it's coming from us. We do our scripts differently from other people, small details. So, I mean, they're all me. Any desire I have is still me. So I think, again, it's just about living in reaction and conformity. And I think the need to say, why am I reacting to every single thing that is going on around me in the expected way? What happens when I call myself out in the way that I call other people out, right? So, you know, you end up being in 5th grade several times a day, and you just keep it secret and hope that no one notices, right? And then if they do notice, you're going to be canceled. And so that's good. And it makes people feel safe and like they can be themselves. And so I think it's, you know, the idea of, am I saying this because I agree or because I'm scared to say it out loud in public because I'm not allowed to? And so Jill is Black, and Louise Busby, who I guess is me, really wanted to tell each other off because they could, right? It doesn't mean that I don't agree with these things or understand them. It doesn't mean that when I have a bad day at work that this isn't what I want to say. It doesn't mean that when I have a really horrible encounter with white liberalism, I'm not like, this is really bad and I don't want to come outside. Right? These are all true things. The problem is that I'm not addressing the individual experiences of my life anymore. I'm no longer meeting people as they are. I'm meeting them with all of these assumptions who I imagine them to be. And so both are happening and both are true, but I prefer one. You know, I prefer the one where I can get past, like, hey, I've had a lot of experiences that have led me to these feelings, and those are valid experiences, and I'm still trying to show up here and know that you are an individual, and getting people wrong all the time, right? Getting things wrong all the time, and we talk to each other like this is it. Even though things are changing so quickly, we are still so self-righteous and like, don't do this, don't say that. It's like, we weren't even doing this 2 years, you weren't doing it. So again, let's do it. But how are we talking to each other? So this is it, this is a new thing, we'll do this forever. You know, good and damn well, we're not doing this forever. We will have a new thing in a month. And again, that does not mean that the new thing isn't true or not good harm reduction for us as a society. It just means, how are we talking to each other? What are these tell-offs that if you don't know all of the rules right now, you are the problem? And why are there rules on how to be yourself? How can I be all these identities and get myself wrong? If I can get myself wrong in the morning, we have a problem. Because I'm really these things. I'm like, am I getting being Black wrong? Am I getting being queer wrong? Or what? I just don't think that's how we build here. But that, you know, that's my opinion. Both as, well, no, just as Louise Busby. Jill's Black, like, I don't really care on that.
Thank you for that. And I'm thinking about what you just said, and also tying it to the idea of scripts. And I think that's what you're saying, that we have like the scripts of like, this is how you do the thing right, whether it's doing your race right, doing your sexuality right, your gender, whatever it is, this is how you do it correctly. And as soon as you fall off, you now may be canceled, or you now may be unfollowed, or whatever it is. And I'm thinking about the title Unfollow Me. And did it have like a correlation with cancellation, or was that kind of a joke of like, are you going to cancel me and follow me just for being human? We're so entirely human in your collection of essence.
I can't say cancel culture because it means several things on the internet. And then if I say it, it implies that I believe that it's not helpful in some way or that it's not true. And I don't want to do that because it is. But if I say that, you know, so that's fun. And then so Unfollow Me actually started because I used to do speaking engagements, and at the end, because you know, awkward, I would say you can follow me or unfollow me at Jill's Black, and officially Louise Busby. And so I had this other title for the book, and me and my editor were like, no. And so we sat around and eventually got to this. But what it does mean is like, I'm going to tell you this stuff, and if you unfollow me, I'm ready to be unfollowed. And that feels like a particular place to arrive because, you know, it was really great being Jill's Black for a long time. It came with a lot of perks. I got to go to a lot of places. People like me. They said nice things in the comment section. My former coworkers know that I got to leave my job a lot. So it was great. And to give that up meant that I was more ready to be myself than I was to give the perks of being somebody else.
Thank you. And if people start putting up their hands, I start calling on people that I will follow questions. With that. So, well, give me the alternate title to the question of essays that you mentioned.
Yeah, it was Sorry to Disappoint.
Did you, how did you lean away from that?
It's just not very marketable.
Oh.
It's not. Yeah, so just marketing, publicity, capitalism. This is a lot more clever than that one. So here we are. But really, it is to say, you know, it really got to be online for some, because it eventually became a book. You know, it's nonfiction, so I submitted a book proposal, and I have like 2 essays kind of done, but the rest of it's written in 6 months. And so at that time, it wasn't as focused on, you know, divorcing from this social media personality. Once it was that, then it made sense for it to imply that we would be talking about the internet in the book, because we do it a lot. So it just became too sense.
And when you're talking about divorcing that social media personality, how has your relationship with social media changed since being published?
Oh, since being published.
Or in general.
Okay, so first I just stopped showing up to the internet. Was my solution, which was cowardice. I was scared because I didn't know how to. At least when I was going there before, I was still being honest. I was wrong, but I was honest. Or sometimes I was right and honest, but loud. I think eventually I couldn't figure out how to not bullshit people and show up at all. And until I could figure out how to do that, I could really return, because I at least wanted to be authentically wrong. You know what I'm saying? So I just stopped showing up enough to sort of maintain like, hey, I'm here. And then it was great because the comments were like, oh great, you're back, we missed you. And that's even better for the ego. And so that was nice for a couple of years. But I think this week, I don't know yet. Well, no, I was wrong, because then I was met with an outpouring of love and support from people who were like, no, we got you no matter what, we're not unfollowing you. We know that you were wrong, or we just like the way you were wrong. We're here. And so, you know, I was paranoid about it, but it ended up being really nice, and it feels good to see people who I thought would unfollow me instead support me this way. So it's nice to see all.
I'm thinking back to what you were saying earlier in the conversation about how you have a phone, you have a social media device, you have access to all the information and all, you know, all the problems that you singularly are supposed to solve in the world. And I'm thinking about the idea of complicity and obligation, and how people maybe within the past 4 years, within the past whatever, forever, trying to perform, I am not complicit because I'm this mad about all of these things all the time. So I'm wondering if you could dive into that a little bit more, if there is a difference between complicity and like the obligation to conform with non-complicity. Was I comparing?
You're so smart. Okay. One more time. So is there a difference? Just give me the last piece.
Is there a difference between or rather, is there an obligation to conform with non-complicity that actually is complicity?
Oh, wow. Okay. So I feel like this is like finals. Although like this is a long answer question. I'm just gonna answer the version that I understand. So, yeah, so I think we're all complicit. Everybody in this room, welcome, is complicit in some way because we're in a Western society. I mean, come on. So here we sit and we do the things, and we're complicit. I think it's that we are now sort of getting off on saying that we're not in the face of obvious complicity, and I'm just like, why? You know, because I don't know how we make any change unless we're willing to say what is actually happening, as opposed to what we agree upon lives over there so that we feel safe dealing with it. And so this isn't like, oh, you'll find out that you're complicit. No, you are. And I still am. But I think what this is a call for, because it's not really a book of solutions, it's a book of questions. And it's saying, why are you scared of being honest? Why are you scared of other people being honest even if you disagree with them? Do you think that it protects you to script people, to have them scared to say what they really think to you? Does that feel like a protective measure that now you've just given them a script so that they can say, oh, this is what you want me to say to you, without questioning you, without asking questions about who you are, why you feel that way or whatever, or you just turn them to Google because they have Google, so it's their job to figure it out. You've done enough work, you're exhausted, which is our stance. So I don't know. I think at this point with this book, the call is just to ask why we are talking to each other like this. And why we say things like, oh, it's about impact and not intent. But spend so much time when it's us explaining our intent. You know, I endless amounts of time saying, wait, hold on, here's why I did it. Please listen to me. And if this person won't listen, then I'll go here and pay this person to talk to me about why I did this thing, which is good, do that. But still, when you are with someone online or now even in person, we are suddenly like, sorry, it's impact. And so you are kicked out of this space. Fine, you know, there's some impact that is really, really, really great. And that is what should happen. But I think we should ask ourselves why we want so much grace and so much empathy and so many people to learn who we are, though we say we're not curious about you or why you do that. Just why? I don't know. I don't find it to be working in my life actually, but I do find it to be what we agree to, and that works because then I don't have to get in trouble, which is what I'm most scared of.
Thank you. And I'm thinking of this quote as it's not me, but it's asking, posing the question, do you want to be right or do you want to be effective? And I think when we have the scripts, there's this idea that this is how you be right. You have a script, someone else, you're copying someone else's learning. But this answer applied in this situation, take it and apply to all your situations and you will not be criticized. But I'm thinking, you mentioned it's about listening, engaging rather than being a book of solutions. And one of the questions I initially wanted to ask you, and I'm just going to go and circle back to it now, is it feels less like a call to action. This is how you do the thing correctly, and more like a invitation to witness frustration or invitation to witness fear, like here's that in the last essay that we read from. And I am curious on your thoughts on what happens when we invite people to witness us rather than the script, and how that can be scary for all participants, both the person who is saying, please witness me, and also the person who is witnessing and realizing they might have to operate without judgment for a brief period of time.
That just is what it is. I think that's really scary. And trust me when I say I had a very scared year waiting for this book to come out. I don't want to lie and say like, oh yeah, this is cool. I'm a performative person. I did a few plays. My mom had me in Shakespeare camp. So like this too is just an act. I'm scared all year. I tortured my mother with like all kinds of paranoia. Please stop. I'm sorry. Please stop. Sorry, you're really not invited to this. Just all kinds of scenarios of what would happen, and you know, I had to just psych myself up. It's an example. It's like, hey, this book isn't for everybody. This is like, if you are feeling like something about this isn't working in your life, like read this book, and I'm going to give you an example of what it looks like to do this publicly, because I don't know what else to do. And I want to write the book, but I don't know how to do it without doing this? I just, how do I not undo this because I'm silent when I don't think I can say anything? So I have to say it. And yeah, I mean, it just is scary, but I want to go back to the part where I did it. And when I truly connect with people who write me, who have written me this week, then I'm really connecting with them. I don't want to falsely connect with anybody. If I go out in public and I'm like amongst strangers, like, let's do all the things, right? I don't know you, I can't get to know you real quick. Harm reduction, this thing, I want to be the least harmful person possible at all times. Great. So I'm gonna do that out here. But we're not even doing it in small groups anymore. So I don't know. It is scary, but you're not really connecting with people around scripts. And if your desire, it doesn't have to be, is to say like, I actually want to be amongst friends in this world, then you would have to tell them something real. If I wanted to wave a flag and change my audience from one who was an audience because they liked that I was mad to an audience that's like, I like that you're honest, then I want that here for myself because I want to hang out. But how do I get to them if I'm still just doing this other, before I can't even get where I'm going? I can't even get to the people that I want in my life because I'm not saying who I am. So I was like, well, if nothing else, if I end up with 2 followers, I'm hoping for 3, honestly, because that's a good group of people. Then at least it's 3 people that I actually connect with. And so I don't know, I think it's quality over quantity. And then of course there's like, you're gonna perform out in society because that's what we agree to as a social practice. And when people don't do it, then we've got some problems. But yeah.
Yeah. Can you actually talk a little bit more about social tax and like what is like the definition of that? How can we talk about a conversation? Is it like something that we all do with each other, or?
I mean, I think these are ways of being polite, like ways that you don't have time to have conversations about why you do the thing that you do, right? So again, I am trying to not harm you in public if I can. I'm also, my part of the social pact is trying not to be defensive in public if you can. Allow yourself to be educated and then go home and think about that thing or talk to a person, sure. But you know, I'm trying to be open and I guess make room for the fact that I also don't know anything. When I encounter new people, I'm learning something new, and I don't know you, and I don't know your life. And if I'm actually curious about you, then I will learn something. So we leave room for that. But we have a social order. We have a way of getting things done. So we're giving into that. I think I'm not meaning so much what we do when it's 1 million people. I mean what we do when we are even talking one-on-one. You know, so this last essay, and I won't give it away, but when I take a person who is an undesirable in certain parts of our society at this point and have a conversation with them one-on-one, they are saying everything that I imagine they would say, but we're doing it very differently than screaming at each other in the comment section, right? And so I don't know. I mean, again, I don't have the solutions for all of this. I'm more trying to ask the question, are you being honest? Are you doing this now in more intimate ways, like dating on a dating app where we can now do all of this stuff and plug it in and whatever, and I do it. Are we doing it in more intimate ways now? Because we used to say, oh, that's the internet that lives over there. It does not live over there now. It just doesn't. And I agree that like 10 years ago, it was like, oh, that's that thing from online. After 2020, and it was already getting there, but certainly not now. We are living in a dual kind of reality if we're participating in social media at all. To the people who aren't, I'm sorry, this talk is so boring for you. We'll talk later. But so I think we kind of live there now, so we might want to make some new rules that just don't involve screaming at emojis. That's all.
Yeah, it's a great idea, and also I'm asking myself like it's such a fearful idea. I want it to exist over there. I want to never engage with the internet. It is a scary place full of ignorant people, but also
a scary place full of ignorant.
It's there,
yeah.
And it's also loving people. And I'm thinking about when you describe yours kind of like the speaking of social media. There's like the person who comes to you or follows you initially because of that one video that went viral, and they saw something in anger that validated and put something in them. And then you're also talking about the honest connections that you are having with this even one-on-one writing. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit to what happens when there is the more activated emotion that people are authentically drawn to because it serves a need, like it helps people and possibly validate, I feel angry because of this, and someone just works with it, and I'm thankful for that. And then also, how do you not go too far? And again, I understand it's questions, not solutions, but
How much validation do you need? I mean, at this point, how much of this do you need? Because in the beginning, it was, oh good, I'm on the internet and here are all the people that I get to design my social group now. And now my world gets to be exactly the way I want it to look. And no, there's no worries there. That's gonna go really well. So now they look like me, we like all the same, and I mean even like your aesthetic, like your cultural, you know, whatever you're doing with yourself, your brand. So like now I'm just hanging out with these of the world online. And so that was nice for a while. I too enjoyed that. I was like picking and choosing people. I was like, oh, I love that song. Now we're besties, but you live in Detroit. And so, you know, there's like people who engage with strangers online, right? And then there's people, it's all family, it's all your cousins, and they're like, I don't need you. But if you are engaging with any strangers, and I'm curious, how much anger do you need to feel good? What are you getting after you get it every day? Because at this point, we're on our phones several times a day getting it. Does it feel good now, right? Because the internet is still, we talk about it like it's stagnant, like it's not changing, like we have one set of rules and it's not growing every day. Does it work to wake up and have someone validate all of your feelings every day, all day? And does it work when you stop seeking out people who don't validate your feelings all day, every day? Because now you're so used to the rush of being understood from a million miles away for a paragraph, mind you, right? For a paragraph or a video or something, I mean, at this point, a meme that makes you feel seen. Then let's talk about how we're lovely. Let's have the real conversation of when do I reach for my phone? When I'm bored, when I'm lonely, when I can't take the noise of my own problems, when I don't want to solve my own problems, when I don't want to be accountable to the people in my life, when I'm sitting here and I should be, when are you getting on it? What are you trying to get from it? If you're like, oh, I just get on it when I'm happy and I'm working through good times and patient with flowers, I'd be like, well, I can't argue with that. Enjoy that. These plants are getting out of control. And so, yeah, but I don't know, like how full does the cup need to be before it's running over with like over validation? And now your world is so small because all you've got is that hit of you or things that look like you. Now what?
that was amazing, thank you. And to be honest, I have about 15 minutes, so again, if anyone has questions, I will be turning to you guys. Thanks for being here. I want to ask you about like that loneliness, and that is what we are, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes that's what's driving our need to participate in social media. And then I'm thinking about that adjacent to complicity and this idea of scripts, thoughts mixing up, but do you think it's this way of maybe if I can perform clinical correctness, or I write, here's a script that will bring me validation, people will say that I'm using the right script. Do you think that that's like a method of just feeding the loneliness? Maybe other people, if they say I'm right,
It feels so good to be right in public, whatever the public right is, which changes depending on which public you're in. So then how do you not try to fit the right of the public that you're in? And now you've eliminated the other public because they don't validate you. So you're just really honing in on the script. And if you're learning the things, then how do you decide who to learn from? Because you weren't the expert to begin with, but yet it's your decision to decide who's right about the things that you're wrong about. I don't know that it's possible, but you know what I mean? Like I don't know. Also, is this true? Like, you know, just at the end of the book, I was like, is this true, y'all? Like, is this what we're getting from it? And again, it's not just the internet. It's the loneliness. Yeah, we're lonely. No one's ever given me a great reason for being on social media all day. If raise your hand if you have a good one, and you're like, that's my job, I'm gonna pay me money. But I don't don't know what we're saying. The point is, and I wanted to say earlier that I think it's important that someone at the intersectional block party be saying this stuff. I am not on the other side. You know what I mean? Because now we've got the thing where us from the other side of the internet. No, those other people say it. And so I'm like, no, I'm like a black queer dyke. I want to say not even queer, I'm a dyke, right? I am from the South. I know what we're saying. I know what these things are. I've done DEI work. I went to the College of California, making activism and social change. I know this stuff. I know this language. These are also my people. And so, because that is true, it does also feel important that within that identity, I spent a lot of time talking about Olympia because my specific loneliness with what starts Jill as Black is I start picking all of these people from across the world really to be my new friends because I'm here and it's incredibly white. And we moved here, my brother's at Evergreen. It's an interesting year to graduate when he did. And so I'm walking around and I'm like, this is great. I'm a pretty granola person. These are my things, right? Like I've got a peace sign tattoo, I'm feeling home, I'm a vegan. And so I'm like, yeah, these are like my people. And in some ways that's absolutely true. But then I got here, I was like, oh, it's so funny. And that's fine too, because I like white people. And so, that's fine. It's not that. It's just, am I being seen as all of the things that I'm told are the most important things about who I am? So now I'm seeking out all of these identities, right? Well, not all of them, because okay, fine, I can get queerness and I can get, okay, but I can't get Black. Can't get it. I'm here 4 years later, I'm like, looks like I can get it these days, look at us. But then I was just like, no. And so that loneliness for me was definitely identity focused. It was saying like, if I can't get it here and I can't be with a group of other Black queer women, I'm gonna find them online and do it. And that did feel fine in the beginning to do that. That felt like meeting a need. It's just then it became the group that I appealed to. It became the group that I tried to impress. It became the group that I thought I was. And it was fine before I started taking on all the attributes of what it meant to fit in. Because really it's about outsiderness and insiderness and when we're interested and when we're one or the other. It can be that even things become hard. So, that loneliness for me was definitely being here and saying, oh, fine, I have to reach for identity. But then I moved down south and I was reaching for Olympia. So, how can you live with it?
I'm thinking more about so when you're feeling groups or like when any activities groups that wanna like this group versus the correct script, right? I'm gonna pick them to decide that they're the right ones to tell me about how I'm supposed to act. And then thinking about again your last essay, when you're having that conversation with that person, and thinking about the level of emotional stamina that's required to have a really human conversation with someone who is in a different group, let's say, like in a different group and not being particularly kind. So I guess my question is how do you balance that emotional stamina, maybe to put it in particular to writing, like how do you choose what to engage with, as in like what do you put text to, right? Like what
Deep person, right? Like you just got a lot. Yeah, it makes sense. How do I answer? I mean, so emotional stamina, I had a reaction to it, so I'll talk about it. I was like, what does that mean? But it's really because I'm so now, I get this like, I'm exhausted. All the time I'm exhausted of you. If someone is trying, I have good emotional stamina. If you are out here and you're not really being open and you don't really want to learn and it's like we're playing a game with each other, then no, I don't have the emotional stamina for that. I have the emotional stamina for anyone who means what they're saying, right? Like if you are asking me genuine questions, how would I have the emotional stamina to answer a genuine question, even if the person doesn't already know what I do and like and am and all the rules to follow? I think we've gotten into a little bit of a script around like, I shouldn't have to do any of this work because now we have the internet. With the internet, they can go choose anything to follow just like they found you. And also, why are we doing that? If it's about human connection, we used to say that's what it was about, then I have the emotional stamina for human connection. I don't have the emotional stamina for people who are really being sincere, but I would suggest getting off the internet for that and actually talking to someone go maybe sit at the airport and have a conversation with a stranger. We're usually okay. We're usually doing okay. We still are nice to each other, whatever. But there, I mean, if you have exhausted yourself, get off of it. You know, get off of it. How did you get here? But someone saying, hey, I'm trying to understand why you said this thing. I'm having a little bit of trouble because I've been doing this for a long time and I just want to make sure I get it. What? What? Like, just no. I mean, and I'm just gonna say, and I like to do this kind of like, I don't know the answers, I'm always changing. And like, no, I can't, but that's safety, so that I can't be wrong. But like that one, I just think is wrong. I don't believe in the one that says I'm too tired to talk to you. I don't have to answer all of your identity focused questions, but if you are asking about me the person, I'm gonna answer all of those questions. If you are on script about my identity, it's like, oh, I read 2 days ago on BuzzFeed that Black people are very interested in, no, that's exhausting. Yeah, that's not a real question. But, you know, like, I have time. And if I don't, then I'm gonna need to take a break and work on me and come back to it. And if you're someone who, for whatever reason, because we all live different lives, does not have that energy and it is sincere, then not you. You know what I mean? But if you're just a person who's still online all day saying, I don't have the time for this, I don't believe you. Even when it was me, I didn't believe you.
Thank you. Closing up the last 10 minutes for chat, I wanted to ask you more about writing in particular. So you have, is it separate? Is it social media, like post on social media one thing, or essays is something else? Is there a difference between writing on computer, you can write, like?
I am a writer, but I'm a writer as a tool for the things that I want to say. Like the thing that feels important to me is getting this message out there. And I have like a couple artsy things that I can do because my mom put me in camps. So like, okay, cool. I like writing. I like acting. Sure. But these are like tools that I'm using to communicate the thing that feels most important to me, which is that I just love to talk about this stuff, obviously. And so I'm using the writing. So when people are like, oh, I'm a writer, they talk about the writing. Like, it's crazy. That's kind of not the kind of writer I am. Wow, it's so cool. I am the kind of writer that's like, you're gonna tell me about the book that it's just like, here's this, and I'm gonna put it out there as much as I can from the gut as possible. If I sit here and think about all these writing things, outside of like basic like talent, you know, which I hope that I have, then it's gonna start getting edited, and I can't do that in what I'm attempting to do. So that just doesn't work for me. So I think if I'm gonna be completely honest, I like to put on some music, off the edible, and we get it done. And then I will edit after I've sort of done a stream of consciousness sort of thing, and then I will edit what I have said. Just so I can clean it up, pretty it up, or whatever. But first I have to kind of get out what I need to say. And if I was making a video and I was instead vocalizing the messages, then I was still like, okay. And then, you know, the tool was seeing me do the performance and everything. But really the point for me is I'm invested in being wrong in public. As wrong and hilariously wrong as I possibly can. And because I do have the bandwidth for these conversations and enjoy them, if you don't, then I'm gonna do it for all of us. And I'm gonna do it in the body of identity that you may not have. So I'm gonna do it and have a lot of the time people just kind of, right, whether they agree with me or not. So, because we're scared of each other now. So I think it's more about the truth component, which is a little bit smug because he's really talking truth. Still not me, but I'm trying. And so again, it's just the tools of my trade. But I do have a lot of fun writing in this book and really shocking myself with what I wanted to be willing to say.
Thank you so much for that. I think last question, unless anyone thought it was jump in. So you said multiple times in the conversation, which I love, that you're very comfortable being wrong. Like that is an okay thing in the book. And I'm wondering, was that always true for you? Or did you hit a moment where you're like, actually, I want more experience being wrong than I will like at least receive focus and correct as a just a human being
probably how I was really miserable thinking I was right. So it was outside of myself. I'm the type of person, I'm a bit neurotic. I like to be really ready for things. People that I was doing those videos like off the cuff, there were like 30 different versions of those videos. I didn't edit them right, so I had to like get it all right. No, come on, Jim, come on. And so there was a lot going into it. But eventually it wasn't feeding me in the same way to have people be like, you're right, this is great, we love it. And I was like, why am I so miserable? And why do I get to be so angry at everybody? And why are all my greatest indulgences fed by the same things that make me right? And eventually I was tired, and then other people started commenting on, hey, are you happy? Right? Because, and I want to say this every single time I talk about this book, I find it so interesting that we got so into this need for self-care. At the same time, we got so mad, right? So we introduced them together. It's like, this is totally working, but also make sure you self-care constantly. And I'm like, well, it seems like it's not working. Okay, well, fine, right? So we spend all this time now and money creating tension on the care, because the rest of the time we're supposed to go in and just be mad. And then we balance that out with care. And then some of us, it's like, also I have to work. So how do I bring that part in? Because now I go to my job and my money is dependent on some of these scripts, and you should follow them. Hey, your jobs you should follow. But like, I don't know. I just wasn't very happy. And, and I have someone to vouch for me. I'm not even going to use this joke with my mother this time, because I've been just checking mom jokes. Okay, thank you. And so instead I will say that I had people in this room that I worked with, and I was just not having a great time in that work anymore. So it was really, really obvious. And I didn't think I was right. So then I stopped thinking I was right, because before it felt good in me. So that is when my cup was full of my own stuff. And it started to spill over in a really, really dangerous way, because then I lost hope. If I'm the only one who knows everything, like, it goes to like, wow, everyone's so lucky that I showed up on this planet at the same time. So like, how did that even happen? And like, I'm watching people think these thoughts. I'm like, how did you think that? You're so lucky that I'm here to protect you. And I don't know how I was born so wildly different, so much more important and all-knowing than you. I have no idea how we were born in those two different human bodies, but maybe it makes sense that I'm the person who should be here while everybody else is here. It's just oracle. Back to what's right. Why do you think you know so much more as you than somebody else? Like, why do we think that we've got all these answers, and we're amazed to look at other people and go, I can't believe that you think that. Well, they probably think it for a reason. Whether it is dangerous, and a lot of times it can be, or not, it's probably for a reason. It's probably just as big a reason as the reason you believe what you believe. So how do we fight people who believe with the intensity that we believe? What do you do with that? Because someone couldn't come and talk you out of your big thing that you believe. So then why are you talking to people like change is for die? Like, this is how we're doing it, but we won't give up anything. So I just don't know how that's a good strategy and how to talk to people.
So it sounds like, is the being right have a certain weight to it that's different than saying I'm just going to be wrong if I have to talk to be wrong? Like, is there a letting go of I don't know, something mandatory about being right all the time? But that's like a lot of stuff to try to hold on to, right? So is that a letting go and saying, yeah, I get it?
Yeah, because then you could get caught, like not being right. That's really scary. And we've said that's really scary too. And so, yeah, it does feel like a weight. And I'll be honest with you, I think because I'm a Black person, that it was like also that I didn't pull like something that does feel close to me. That I was like, I was not necessarily a person on social media who's followed by a lot of like white people trying to educate themselves. That just wasn't the thing. I was followed by mostly Black people and a lot of Black men. And so I was like, but I I don't want to lose you, right? Because this is also about something that I am, that I hold close and tight, and these are people in my family. And so mostly I was scared because I didn't want to be the outsider to that. And I wanted to figure out the right way. If you can keep everybody, then of course you want to, right? So I was like, okay, so let me figure out how to keep all the people happy, right? So then I have to be right to everybody, right? Because I had different types of people following. So I'm like, okay, but I'm gonna stay in this position of being that I have to be right for every single person. And then how? Because then I'm also followed by this queer group, and they're like, well, hey, I noticed that you're talking about being Black, but you're not engaging in being queer anymore. I'm like, oh, okay, right, okay, great. So then let me go, oh, but I'm also, and when you do this and you're not addressing this, but what about how these Black men are doing this? What about these white? Okay, right. So, okay, how am I going to be right to all of these people? I can't. So in the end, I can really only be right to me, which again is very, very hard to do. That's hard to do. I'm not sitting up here like, oh, that was awesome. But I'm done. Here's my book. It's fine. I'll sign for you. Look, no, I don't know. It's a willingness, I think. Once a day, I want you to just see me looking at you and be like, do you really mean that? I'm here, I'm in all these identities, and I'm telling you, I don't know. Like, I don't know. But I was really scared to lose people. That was not just a scary feeling, but like a sad feeling of I had gained roots with an intensity level that I had never imagined was possible. And the idea of losing was terrible. It was just the unfollowing was terrible. And I, got married during this time, and I sort of, like I'd been out for years, so people were ignoring that I was queer so that I could be right, to them. So they were like, well, we're not going to engage with the fact that you're queer because we like what you say about Blackness, and we don't believe that this thing is happening. So I was like, all right, fine. So then I had to come out, which was strange, but fine. And I did that by announcing that I was married, and just watched all the numbers drop. And, it was like, okay, sure. So, but I was this the whole time. This was always true. And I still meant the thing, even though it was true. When I was getting married on that day, I still meant this stuff. So how does knowing more about me make me now someone you can't follow, even though I'm saying the same thing? And even that was curious because it meant that I wasn't being my whole self. So it's like an idea, it's like an example of how we are checking in with ourselves in a really chaotic society around how honest we're being. It's a check-in that I think is necessary before we go out and do the work of seeing what is going on out here, because it's wild times.
Thank you so much. I think we have gone over a little bit, which is fantastic. Thank you so much for all your insights. So we have copies of Unfollow here ready for you to purchase. Jill is so wise and human in this book. I would really suggest it to everyone. Please buy a copy. And thank you so much for this
Thank you.
conversation.
Those questions. Wow. You felt bad for me for a second. You were like, oh, that's not me. Yeah, it was a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we have copies over here for sale. Oh my gosh, end the thing. Yes.